Three, two, one, roll the footage. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Strategy Show. I'm your host, Simon Severino. Today, we have Director of Digital Strategy at Cornett, a Kentucky-based advertising agency. He's a rock star. He was at South by Southwest, at TED, and many more stages. His upcoming book is called Winfluence. Hello, everybody, Jason Falls.
Hello, Simone. Thank you for having me. This is great.
So cool to have a rock star here. And we are going to deep dive into why we should think influence, not influencers, how to ladder up your marketing goals and your business goals, and why you should plan to measure. So, Jason, what are you currently creating?
Well, I am currently creating a lot of video content, a lot of live streams. Cornett, the agency that I work for, has a lot of great clients that are trying to provide better online, content and connections to their audience because of COVID, but also they were doing a lot of that before the COVID, lockdowns and quarantines. But we produce a live stream every week for the Buffalo Trace Bourbon Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky, where the master distiller or some other staff member takes you on a tour of the distillery for 15 or 20 minutes, or they'll do a bourbon tasting and explain the different brands of bourbon and whatnot they have. So that's been a lot of fun. The Keeneland Thoroughbred horse racing track is in Lexington, Kentucky, and they did their summer meet 2 weeks ago, and we produced a 30-minute preview show for them that was all web-based, all live-streamed web show, which had analysis of the races and how to bet at the racetrack kind of segments. So we're creating a lot of video content, but we're also creating a lot of marketing communications for our healthcare clients, our travel and tourism clients, our education clients. So we're staying really busy and just creating a lot of great content that hopefully connects the dots between our clients and the audiences they're trying to reach.
Now that South by Southwest and the other rockstar stages you are usually on are in lockdown, what do you do now?
This, virtual shows, live streams, a lot of webinars, a lot of seminars, a lot of conferences. Most of the major marketing conferences that I'm typically involved with are moving to some sort of virtual event. I know that I'm getting prepared to speak at Inbound, which is another large marketing conference typically held in Boston. It's HubSpot's user conference every year coming up in, I think it's October, maybe November. And they've gone completely online, completely virtual this year. So they've rethought how a conference should work in the virtual space. So it's not just, a webinar after webinar after webinar. They're doing a lot of author Q&As. They're doing podcast highlights for people who have podcasts. So they're doing a lot of smaller, like 20-minute education segments. So I like the way that they're evolving that conference, and lots of the other offline events are trying to reimagine what they look like in the online space. So we're doing this. We're doing live streams. We're joining Simone to talk about our upcoming books and share the knowledge that we have. And right now, that's what we're limited to. But quite frankly, it means we don't have to travel. We don't have to outlay a lot of expense to do this, and we connect with more people on a regular basis. So it's actually been quite good, I think, for me anyway, and at least in sharing the ideas that I like to share with folks.
Since your book will come out soon, Winfluence, first of all, why did you start writing a book?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Winfluence is actually my third book. And so my first two, though, were 8 or 9 years ago. It's been a long time since I've actually published something of that magnitude. And I had just done an influencer marketing course for marketing profs. And my agent called me up and said, okay, I know you're working on this influencer marketing course. Surely to goodness, that's, the basis, the nugget of what a book idea could be. Why don't you give that some thought? Because it's high time you wrote another book. It's been too long. And so I gave it some thought. He kind of talked me into it. And then I really got excited about the possibility and had a thread of an idea that I thought was unique, that other people weren't really thinking about or talking about. And then all of that combined with the fact that I was actually implementing influence marketing programs for our clients at Cornett and experimenting and doing some things that were maybe a little a little different than what other folks were talking about in terms of case studies. I thought this is the right time for me to say, here's what I know about this topic. Here are the ideas that I have about this particular industry and how it can evolve. And here's how brands can use influence marketing to be successful. And so I got excited about it, and I just sat down and started writing it, and it just kind of flowed. It was just like I had an idea of what I wanted to write, and I just started and didn't stop till I was done. And so pretty happy with the manuscript. I should get my first round of edits back this week or next week. So it's due out in January, I think, from Entrepreneur Press. So very excited about it.
Why publisher in an age where you could also self-publish?
So that's kind of the age-old question, really, because I've had several friends who have self-published. And the bottom line for me is, number one, distribution. I can, self-publish and post on Amazon, and it can be available online. And so I can technically reach a global audience. But a publisher like Entrepreneur Press, who I'm publishing this book with, not only has the ability to get it into real world bookstores. So in America, we have Barnes and Noble, we have Books A Million, we have several physical bookstore brands that are still popular places for people to go and shop for books, which is a big, avenue to market and sell your book. But they also have all of the appropriate online connections to get them highlighted in those online stores like Amazon. But I think more importantly, the publishers like Entrepreneur Press bring with them marketing and promotions muscle that I don't necessarily have by myself. Entrepreneur Press is a division of Entrepreneur Magazine, which is a large, monthly publication, both online and off. So they have the ability to advertise and market the book to that particular audience, which is really who the audience is for the book. So there's a better distribution possibility through a traditional publisher, and you can get the marketing and promotions engine of that publisher behind you to help promote the book. If I were to self-publish, I would be limited to what I personally can afford, or maybe what Cornett would be willing to invest in marketing and promoting the book, which might be a few $1,000s. Well, an advertisement, just a single advertisement in Entrepreneur Magazine, is tens of thousands of dollars. So now all of a sudden the value that you're getting out of the marketing and promotions from going with a traditional publisher is much greater. You get the book in front of more people, and eventually you sell more copies.
CEO tip number 1. Why should we think influence and not influencers?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So that was really kind of the perspective, the theme of this book, Winfluence, is I honestly believe that most brands, when they think of influencer marketing, they think of YouTube and Instagram, and it kind of stops there. They don't think so much about the other social networks. And then they completely forget that when you're trying to influence an audience, it's not about going to a specific social network or a specific person online who has a big following. It's about finding anyone who can influence your audience to take the action you want them to take. So someone who is the president of the local Parent Teachers Association is influential over people who are parents in that community. The local mayor and elected officials are influential. Traditional news media outlet members, the people who host the TV news, they are also influencers as well, even though they might not have a big online following. I think if we use the term influencer marketing, we are putting blinders on and focusing on social networks, where we should be talking about influence marketing and opening it up to anyone who can have an impact on what we're trying to do. In my first book, which was called No Bullshit Social Media, that Eric Deckers and I co-wrote a few years ago, we used an example. It wasn't really talking specifically about influencer marketing or influence marketing, but it was a great example of it. Eric's wife, Tony, loves the Toyota RAV4 automobile. She had bought one, loved it, thought it was a great car. And so she actually persuaded I think her brother or sister to buy one, her mother and father to buy one, and then I think Eric ended up buying one too. So she influenced 4 people to make an automobile purchase. She didn't have at the time an online following at all. So what I'm trying to say is we've got to stop thinking of influencers in this sort of narrow-minded view of the world and start thinking of not who we're trying to reach from a channel perspective, but what we're trying to do from a marketing perspective. What we're trying to do is influence. So I would like to propose that to think about influence marketing in a more broad fashion, we get rid of that R on the end of the word so that we don't sort of prejudice our thinking to think Instagram and YouTube, and instead think we're trying to influence our audience to do things. Let's use anyone who happens to have influence over that audience.
So it's much more specific and much more near and real. So if I'm a small business, do you have some examples of somebody doing it right? Like, I'm a small business, how can I approach influence versus influencers?
Sure. And for small businesses, it's actually more relevant because a small business isn't necessarily going to be able to afford to go out and engage someone on YouTube or Instagram with 500,000 followers, but they don't need to. If I'm a small business, especially in a small local community, I need to impact and have influence over the people who impact my audience, the people who are potential buyers. So I'll give you an example. In Lexington, Kentucky, which is where Cornett is, it's a community of about 320,000 people. So it's a good sized city, but it's not massive, right? And so for a local business in Lexington, Kentucky, let's say it's a restaurant or maybe even a boutique store that sells clothing and apparel. There are 5 or 6 people in town who have built influence online and offline from talking about going out and eating at local restaurants, from shopping in local boutiques and services. So Kim Kardashian doesn't mean anything to me if I own that business, but someone like the Kentucky Taste Buds, who are 2 young ladies who basically shop and eat and review local businesses and have a podcast. They are on a Saturday morning regular terrestrial radio show, hosting a radio show on a local radio station. They have a blog. They have an active Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter feed, and they really use all of their content to encourage people to shop and invest in local businesses. Those 2 individuals are much more influential to the people that I need to reach than Kim Kardashian or anyone else who has a massive following online. So it's thinking about who has an impact on my audience. Now, though, that's an example of a traditional online influencer, but you could still also develop a partnership with, for instance, there's the head of a local nonprofit there is a gentleman by the name of PG Peoples. He's the CEO of the Urban League in Lexington, Kentucky. He doesn't have a massive online following, but if he talks about your business in a meeting at the Urban League, a lot of people are going to hear that. So maybe it's finding creative ways to connect with him so that he is referring people to you. It's more in line with traditional public relations and community relations than it is social media or Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. But you can look at it very broadly and find multiple people online and off who influence your audience.
I love it. These examples are really applicable and really relevant right now to so many people listening. Thank you.
Good.
Before we go to CEO tip number 2, ladder up your marketing and business goals, we move to the segment of our show, which is called the Strategy Award. Welcome to the Strategy Award. You can pick one person who is doing things really differently, really out of mainstream, but from your perspective, they are doing it right. Who would you pick?
Wow. That's a really good question. I think probably the one that comes to mind the quickest for me, and I apologize for using a client example. I should probably think beyond that, but this is highly relevant to the conversation we're having. The University of Kentucky healthcare system, which is a hospital basically in Lexington, Kentucky, had a brand video that Cornett helped produce a year ago. And they wanted to get a lot of people to put eyeballs on that video to make sure that the video launch was successful. And so what they did in conjunction with obviously myself and some of my teammates at Cornett, is we found the online influencers like the Kentucky Taste Buds and the people that we were talking about that would, sort of help encourage people to go watch this video. But we did the offline piece too. We reached out to the mayor's office. We reached out to local elected officials. We reached out to a local dentist. We reached out to a local real estate agent who we knew had impact in the community and asked them all at the same time, once this video was launched, let's all go there within the first 2 hours. Let's comment on it, react to it. Let's share it with our networks and see if we can't amplify the reach of that video, because there's a lot of activity on it all at the same time, which fuels the Facebook algorithm to make sure content appears in front of more people. And so it worked. I mentioned earlier that Lexington, Kentucky is a community of 320,000 people. I think by the end of the first 3 or 4 weeks, we had 700,000-800,000 views on this video. So, almost 3 times as many people in the community had seen this video launch. And there was a lot of engagement around it that actually inspired more content that the brand could use down the road. So again, I think my awards would be to anyone who is looking at influence marketing from that wide angle lens and trying to focus on people who influence our audience, not just someone on a social network that has a big following.
Thank you. CEO tip number 2, ladder up to your marketing and business goals.
Right. Yeah. Laddering up is a phrase that I use a lot. And it's because when you're thinking about social media or even influence marketing or email marketing or anything that gets really tactical and granular with what you're doing, you need to have that strategic mindset of why are we using this? What's our goal? What's the reason we're doing it? And it should always ladder up to, if you're doing something in social media, it should ladder up to your marketing goals. Your marketing goals should ladder up to your business goals. So if your business goals are to increase market share or increase sales and revenue, then your marketing goals have to be designed to accomplish that. And then within your marketing goals, if you're using email marketing, there better be some reason, some strategic path that you're carving out that helps you accomplish higher revenue or whatever your ultimate business goals are. Too often, I think that businesses, especially small businesses who maybe don't have a strategist on staff that's helping them work through marketing strategy, they're really focused on dry cleaning or making flowers or, selling shoes or whatever their business is. And they don't think always in terms of marketing. The biggest mistake they make is they say, ooh, there's Snapchat. Or there's Instagram, let's go do that. And they never think, well, why am I actually doing it? What am I using it for? How is it helping my business? And so therefore, they invest time, maybe some money, maybe some energy into it. And it doesn't ever actually convert customers for them. It doesn't ever actually do the things that they expect it might do because they didn't plan that from the get-go and say, I want this to ladder up to my marketing goals, which are then going to ladder up to my business goals. If you put every little tactical thing that you do through that filter, does it ladder up? Then you're ultimately going to be a lot more satisfied with the outcomes you have.
This is strong. So think about it also in a numeric way. I guess it's good to put some numbers in there and to review it and to see if it really builds on your goals. And if you see that it doesn't, stick to your goals, but change the activities.
Exactly. Always optimize. You can try anything in the world, but if you're not checking the benchmarks, looking at your progress, how are we progressing toward that goal? If you're not progressing at the pace you want, or you're not progressing at all, then stop what that you're doing and change the approach so that you can optimize and get better. So that ultimately at the end of the day, you can look and say, we started out slow, but we fixed things along the way. And now the chart's going up and to the right.
This is so important. And sometimes people nowadays say, yeah, but I don't know if I do this on this marketing channel, if it will bring that number. So why should I do this exercise? And what we answer then in our accelerator is, it's like chicken and egg. you don't know because you never wrote it down. You never did a numeric estimation of what it can be that the result is. So start by putting in some numbers, a first fantasy numbers, and then every 7 days, our sprint length is 7 days, every 7 days you measure it and you tweak it and improve it. And so week by week, the fantasy number will become a reliable number and eventually a precise number.
Exactly. That's it.
Cool. 2 professional books that inspired you.
2 professional books that inspired me. I think I go back to the early to mid 2000s, and Brand Hijack by Alex Whipperfirth is probably the one book that I read that really inspired me to think about marketing and advertising differently. And it was really a story about sort of consumer movements and word of mouth and guerrilla marketing. It was, talking about how Doc Martens became popular again, and it wasn't because the brand was throwing money down one channel or another or pushing certain buttons. It was because a community of people valued that brand and made it popular, and the brand didn't really know what was going on. They were hijacked by their customers. And so I think Brand Hijack is probably 2005 is when that came out. That's one of my favorite professional books probably ever. And then the one book that I keep going back to over and over again is The New Rules of Marketing and PR by David Meerman Scott. I think that book, more than any, sort of opened up a blueprint for public relations professionals, professional communications people, and even the advertising and marketing world to say, here's what new media, what digital media, what social media means and how we can use it. I think the book is now in its 7th or 8th edition. David Meerman Scott is just brilliant. He's got several other books out too, but that particular book is really almost a tactical blueprint for how to do public relations and marketing in the digital era.
Strong. And 2 personal books that inspire you.
Ooh, I got to look around at my bookshelf to figure that one out. 2 personal books that have inspired me. I think the probably the one book that I keep coming back to over the course of time and reading over and over again that has inspired me in a lot of different ways in my life is The Catcher in the Rye. And that's a controversial book because that's the book that's been in the hands of nefarious people who have committed crimes over the years. But I have always been fascinated by J.D. Salinger's narrative and story about questioning the world around you. And it's kind of that sort of mantra of mine to look at what's real and what's here and step back and say, well, why is that the way it is? And is there something I can do to change it? So it kind of gives me this inspiration to kind of question everything, question authority, question reality. And I think that kind of lends into how I've lived my life. It's constantly not following the crowd when they go do something, but figuring out why are they doing it and do I align with that? So that would be one. And the other one that I wanted to bring up, I'm actually reading right now. It's a heavy book. It's Grant by Ron Chernow. It's about Ulysses S. Grant, who was the 18th president of the United States and the basically the hero of the Civil War in the United States. And it's a big, huge book. And I don't read books this big very often. But the reason that I would point that out now is obviously with the social issues and unrest, particularly in America now with regard to race and the Black Lives Matter movement. Grant gives me a great context to go back and really understand the U.S. Civil War and the Reconstruction period after the war, to understand where the seeds of sort of racial discomfort came from after slavery was ended and all of those things happened in the United States, which I know isn't entirely relevant or something that people globally know too much about. But it's helping me understand contextually better what's happening in the United States and some other countries right now with regard to racism. And I'm trying to just sort of know more, understand more, and be a better person with regard to, diversity and equity and acceptance. And so it's helping me sort of understand and broaden my horizons in that regard.
CEO tip number 3, plan to measure.
Yes. I have a great analogy for this. So when from an agency perspective, or even from an internal marketing perspective, you typically get to the end of a year or the end of a quarter or the end of a campaign, and someone says, okay, how did we do? And so you pull up analytics and you look at the analytics and say, well, here are our measures. Well, first of all, if you didn't start your campaign with a plan to measure, how are you going to know what to look at when you get to the end? When you get to the point where you want to look at the analytics, you have to have something a goal that you're trying to achieve and a measure that you're trying to move in what you're doing. And so I say, waiting until the end to measure what you did is like getting to the end of your driveway with your family and saying, where are we going to go on vacation? You're already in the car, but you didn't pack. You don't have maps. You don't have money. You haven't figured out who's going to feed the pets while you're gone. Like you have to make a plan to succeed and to measure what you're trying to achieve in your marketing before you ever start to measure. So getting to the end of a 6-month period and looking at your web analytics means the only thing you were trying to do was drive more web traffic. But if you start out by saying, all right, we're going to convert more customers through our e-commerce sales online. And the way that we're going to do that is by A, driving more traffic, B, creating better opportunities for them to convert on our website, and C, promoting the deals and whatnot that we have on our website on our various other channels. That means that you can start with that plan with those goals and say, okay, how are we going to drive more people to our website? How are we going to convert those customers once they're there? Now you start to build a roadmap that is a plan to go back and measure at the end and say, did we achieve the things in the plan? So you've got to start out with the idea, not just here's our strategy, here's our communication, here's what we're going to do, but how are we going to also measure that? If you do that, it allows you to set the right data traps along the way to be able to optimize and know what you're doing as you move through your program, and then better understand what you accomplished when you get to the end of that program.
When it comes to measuring, especially marketing, there are so different views on that. And many people lose so much time when they start, and then after a couple months or years, they then see, oh, these metrics, it isn't that relevant to what I'm trying to accomplish. And some metrics are just maybe fancy metrics, but are not so important. So what should people measure?
Well, it depends. It depends on, what your goals are and what you're trying to do. Obviously, most businesses want to measure sales and revenue, right? So return on investment is a metric that people often look at. What you have to remember, though, when it comes to certain parts of marketing, like social media, email marketing, and things like that, when you get granular with the channel that you're using, it may or may not be conducive to a financial metric. Like, you can certainly hang advertisements with a buy now button on your social media channels, but people aren't on social media channels to shop. So that might not be the best place to do that. You might use Facebook or YouTube or Instagram as a channel to create awareness about your brand, so that when they see your brand in other more appropriate channels to purchase, then you have better conversion rates there. But your conversion rates over here on Instagram aren't necessarily going to be all that great, because that's not what that channel's for. Now, it can be used for that. I don't want to make it, anybody think that you can't use Instagram to drive revenue, but there are certain channels that are better suited for awareness metrics. You can't answer how much awareness did we create by answering it with what your ROI is, because ROI is a financial metric. It's about dollars and cents and money. It's a formula of the amount of money you made minus the amount of money you spent divided by the amount of money you spent. There's only financial metrics in there. If you're trying to create awareness is measured by how many eyeballs did you get in front of, how many people are repeating your message over time in online or offline conversations. Those are not financial metrics. So the biggest problem that people have with measuring things in marketing is they think ROI is the only goal, and they try to run everything else through an ROI filter, and that's just not You're comparing apples to oranges there. You're not comparing apples to apples. So find the channels that make sense to be revenue drivers, conversion channels, measure the ROI there. Use your other channels to drive awareness, point people to those other channels, and measure awareness appropriately in the channels where that's your ultimate goal.
Absolutely. So if you are an awareness piece and you have a conversion piece in between, there is this building the relationship, the nurturing piece.
Right. Have
you seen good examples lately of how somebody can nurture that? So you have a podcast, for example, or a YouTube channel, and then you have people there, but as you say, they don't want to buy. So how can you invite them into a funnel, let's say an email newsletter,
sure,
where you keep them warm?
Sure. I think content marketing really is about creating, interesting, educational, entertaining elements of entertainment, and information for people in the form of videos, in the form of written content via email or blogs or whatnot, and other interactions. Right. So you create content to have a reason for your audience to pay attention to you and a reason for your audience to connect with you. That content marketing over time is teaching them to know you, to like you, and trust you. And as they develop the nature of that relationship to know you, like you, and trust you, then at the end of the day, when they're ready to purchase what it is you sell, you're the person they're most likely to come and buy from because they know you, they like you, and they trust you. Your marketing messages can be mixed into your content. You can actually present calls to action for people to purchase what it is you sell within your content. But the overall content marketing goal really is to nurture that relationship along so that those people trust you ultimately when they are ready to purchase. If I sell mattresses, so, beds, bedding, and mattresses, more often than not, a person is only going to buy a new bed about every 8 to 10 years. That's kind of what people recommend. A mattress should last about that long if it's a good mattress. So I'm not trying to sell every single person that comes to my YouTube channel or that comes to my website to read my content on my blog or anything like that. I'm not trying to sell every single person on a mattress today. I'm trying to create a relationship with that audience and with each customer so that they come back when they want to have good ideas on how to manage your sleep or good ideas on how to foster more relaxation in your life or some other content that's relevant to sleep and to sleeping products, but is more useful on a day-to-day basis for the audience. That way, when they say, you know what, our mattress has got the sag in the middle, it's time to get another one. We've already flipped it. It still isn't great. Let's get a new mattress. Well, who are we going to buy a mattress from? Well, I read the content on this particular mattress company's blog all the time about sleep and relaxation. I really trust them. I think we should purchase from them. That's the overall sort of point of content marketing. And I think you can see examples of good companies doing that to nurture audiences along over time in any industry. There's tons of examples out there of companies that are doing it really well.
Who should be my next guest on the show?
Wow, that's a great question. Who should be your next guest on the show? Well, I tell you what, I actually just reached out to and contacted an old friend this morning to be a guest on my show. So he's top of mind, and I think he'd be a great guest on your show. His name is Lee Lefevre. And he, for those of you who don't recognize the name, you probably, if you were around the internet 10 years or so ago, you might recognize the company named Commoncraft. They were the company back in 2006, 2007 that made the neat kind of paper cutout animation explainer videos of this is what Twitter is and this is what a blog is and whatnot. So Commoncraft is a fairly well-known video explainer company. Well, in those videos, they had these little paper cutouts that were moved around on the screen by a pair of hands. Those were Lee's hands. So he is kind of the master at explaining things to people. And he's got a new book coming out. And so I think he'd be a great guest for your show.
Thank you so much. Where can people find your staff work with you?
So Team Cornett, Team, Cornett, CORNETT.com is the Cornett website, and that's where you can find our episodes of our podcast, our video stream. Digging Deeper is the name of that, which we air live every Tuesday morning, but the archives are there on teamcornett.com. And then certainly I'm Jason Falls all over the place. So I'm Jason Falls on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. And you can go to jasonfalls.com, which is my website for my sort of speaking arrangements and things like that. But you're welcome to connect with me anywhere on social networks at Jason Falls. And you can look for Cornett at Team Cornett on most social networks as well.
Thank you, Jason. I'm so happy that South by Southwest was on lockdown, because now you could be a rock star here. Keep rolling and come back soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.